Today on Tuesday, June 18, 2024, I, Melanie Flores, will be conducting an interview for the LGBT Oral History Project aimed at documenting the history of LGBT life at Community College of Baltimore County. We are currently here at CCBC Essex and will be interviewing Vice President of Administrative Services, Melissa Hopp. Could you please confirm your name, pronoun, state, and location?
Sure. My name is Melissa Hopp, and my pronouns are she, her, and today is June 18th, and we're at CCBC Essex.
Awesome. Now we'll begin with the questions. What was your life like prior to coming to CCBC? Where did you grow up and go to college?
Sure. So I grew up outside of Chicago, and we lived in the suburbs, and I went to high school in the suburbs. It was a pretty vanilla kind of existence. And then I went to college in Grinnell, Iowa, at Grinnell College, and I did my graduate work at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Go Blue.
Awesome. And before coming to CCBC, what other jobs or positions did you hold prior?
So I've been in higher education a long time. I worked in Illinois government for the agency that regulated community colleges. And then I've been the vice president at 3 colleges, at Lincoln Land Community College in Springfield, Illinois, at Camden County College in New Jersey, right across from Philadelphia, and here at CCBC. So altogether, I've been a vice president for like almost 40 years. So
it's a really, really long time.
A really, really long time.
And so when you were working as a college administrator and executive, what was your experience like being LGBT in that time period, especially speaking in the 1990s? And did you always feel the need to hide your identity?
Well, yeah, I did, right? So, so you're right. You know, I started working in the 1980s, and you know, so just to kind of give you a point, history point. I was working in state government in Illinois, and we went to the legislature because we were coming on the last days for the adoption of the Equal Rights Amendment. Okay, so I mean, the Equal Rights Amendment, where we would have put into the Constitution that women are equal to men. So that is the workforce that I entered. You know, without the constitutional protection that women and men were equal. So, you know, so it was bad enough to be a woman in that world, let alone be a lesbian. So, so absolutely, you know, you had to protect yourself, and assure that, you know, I suppose, I mean, you know, no one is always completely completely opaque, right? So people could figure it out, but you would never admit it. You would, oh, you know, I'm just going with a friend to X. And you would always say things like that, or you would be really vague about what you were going to do. And I was lucky enough to meet my wife, and after a while we were living together. But, you know, we had to have 2 telephone lines into the house, you know. This was before cell phones, right? And so, you know, there was the line that she would answer, and there was the line that I would answer. And, you know, you just didn't admit that you were living together just because you know, it wasn't good. I mean, people were losing their jobs for being gay. So, you know, you did what you could to protect yourself.
Mm-hmm. And how long have you been with your wife?
With my wife?
Yes.
So 34 years.
Oh, wow.
Long time.
That's a
long time. Yeah.
And well, so that was, you said that was in the 80s and like the 90s.
Right.
So when you started coming to CCBC, how was that experience like here?
Well, CCBC, okay, so I came to CCBC in 2007. So the world was different.
Of course.
So I came to CCBC being out, although discreetly out.
Yes.
You know, I wasn't going to deny it and those kinds of things. But in certain company, I wouldn't bring it up, right? Just because you were, you know, you continued to be careful. But with my boss and with the people that I worked with closely, I was very open. And that was, you know, it was incredibly freeing. I'm jealous, really, of folks coming up now, right? Because you can, you know, you can be your authentic self all the time, and there's not a part of you that you're hiding or trying to keep secret. So doing that. I mean, so CCBC was a great opportunity. I would say that, you know, before I came to CCBC, my wife, she got ill, seriously ill, and you know, that was kind of my moment where I was sort of like, you know what, nothing else matters. I'm just gonna, you know, if they fire me, they fire me. If, you know, if that happens, okay, we'll do something else. And, you know, that was really hard. And it was a really freeing time for me because it allowed me, you know, to see what I had been afraid of. You know, it didn't really happen. You know, no one really didn't treat me right or was rude to me or, you know, disowned me or anything at that time. I was, you know, the world had changed. And so coming out was a very gratifying and empowering experience, you know. Of course, you know, people were like, yeah, well, you know, what took you so long? We knew, right? But it was good for me.
That's wonderful. And well, at least you said you came out here and when you were in CCBC. How about when you were interviewing for your position? Were you open about the idea that you had a wife?
At CCBC? Yeah, I was. I was with the president, who, you know, my boss.
Yes.
We were not, you know, gay marriage hadn't happened yet. So, I spoke with my partner.
Yes.
And that was clear. And I think, you know, shortly, I don't know, probably within my first month here, the president took us both out to dinner and we had a nice chat. Now I was a little bit more circumspect in, you know, generally. You know, perhaps with the board, I was a little bit more circumspect, or, you know, with government officials. I mean, not that I was hiding it, but I didn't find a reason to talk about it.
And is there a moment in time where you were like, okay, I am more free to talk about it, even with the board members in general?
Yeah, sure. I think that when the backdrop and society changed, and particularly when gay marriage was available nationally, by that time, right? I read 70% of people supported gay people, and so by that time certainly, and now I don't even think of it, And board member will say, oh, well, you're going to do, great, you're having that vacation. Now you tell your husband. And I'm like, no, I'm going to tell my wife. And okay.
In general, I wanted to ask about what your title entails, what responsibilities you hold.
Sure. So I'm the Vice President of Administrative Services. So that means the things that make the college run outside of the classroom, right? So HR and information technology and finance and college operations and institutional research, the bookstore, facilities, all those kinds of things. That's what I work on.
And okay, so then, before legalizing same-sex marriage, Maryland passed laws extending domestic partner benefits. So did CCBC extend these domestic partnership benefits to their employees and staff? And how did this policy affect you?
Sure. So, yes. I've got a couple, so domestic partner benefits were available in various Fortune 500 companies for a while. They were not available at CCBC. And I remember, we had the discussion about that. And I remember a particular meeting with some of the decision makers at the college, and there wasn't unanimity that this was something that we should do. I got to give it to President Gertenitis, because she kind of worked behind the scenes and got everybody circled around on that issue, and so that by the end of that academic year, we were the board was able to pass the regulations to provide domestic partner benefits. Now, did I, for CCBC, of course I listed my wife as my emergency contact and that, but we were lucky enough that we didn't need the health insurance. My wife had health insurance from her job. So we didn't need that. And so, certainly, heaven forbid, right? If somebody in her family had died, I had bereavement leave and things like that. But the big push was access to health care, health insurance. And that's what a lot of domestic partners wanted and needed. The other benefits were helpful. Certainly it was a whole package, right? So the other benefits were helpful. They were not as significant in their cost as the health insurance.
And so, since you said you're responsible for finance and budgeting, so did you do anything or help budget and find the monies to support this policy?
Yeah, I did. So, so Human Resources reports to me as well. So, I helped draft the policy. We went through all of our employee benefits and added the policy so that all relevant benefits were added. Now, the cost really was not that much. Back in the, back when domestic partner benefits first came out, companies would say, oh, our our costs are going to skyrocket. It was during the time of AIDS, before we had any drugs to really make that kind of a chronic disease instead of a life-ending disease. And so people were all afraid, oh, domestic partner benefits, you're going to end up with a lot of guys with AIDS on the in the insurance, and that'll cost more. That turned out to not be true, but it is what people thought and expressed at the time. At CCBC, it was a relatively modest cost to provide that access. I mean, our employees, even for myself, we all contribute a portion. It's 15-20% of the cost of our benefits.
Yes.
And so we continued to do that. You didn't have people signing up that didn't really need the benefit, because why would you pay 20% of the cost if you didn't need it? And so I think that made it a much easier implementation, because people that needed the benefits, that's who got it, and that was good.
Yeah. And do you recall the time period that this all occurred in?
Yeah, we talked about this. Was it October of 2010? I think that's when we started talking about it, in 2010. At CCBC. So by spring of that year, that's when we were able to pass the benefits.
When you were actually able to implement them.
It was implemented, yeah.
I also wanted to ask about other policies. So I know CCBC has made recent efforts for more LGBT diversity and inclusion, just like the gender inclusive bathrooms and the preferred names. So what was the process of establishing these policies?
Right. So so let's talk. I mean, the preferred names actually came through a Senate committee, because at CCBC, the great thing about working here is that for the most part, you've got folks whose heart's in the right place, and they want to do everything that we can to assure that our students are happy and supported. And so the idea was, heaven forbid somebody, would want to, would not be called by the name that they wanted to be called, right? That would be pretty awful.
Yes. And
so the preferred name policy arose out of the Senate. And it was presented and approved, I think, relatively quickly. The issue becomes, the implementation, and how do you make that happen? So we're working now on allowing employees and students to designate X as their gender. And that, you would think that would be easy. It is not. And it is not because, we don't have little 3x5 cards with everybody's name and class schedule on it, right? We do it in a computer. And so the computer has to recognize the X. Well, that's one set of issues. And our computer software started being able to do that effective last July. But now what we have to do is assure that everywhere that we send that data, they are prepared to accept the X. So we just talked about insurance, right?
Yes.
And if someone has designated their legal sex as X, and we're going to send the data to the insurance company so that they get their insurance card, well, then the insurance company's system has to be able to recognize X. And you'd be surprised. We've been, fighting that out because not all of those companies are ready to do that. Some are ready, some are not.
Yeah.
And so it's a real change, and many of the colleges, I think we're going to be the first community college in the state to do the legal acts. And then the issue on preferred name, we found that, students can indicate their preferred name in Brightspace, but then that information doesn't get transferred to their permanent record, so that every semester, they have to re-enter it. So we're working on that. And then, we need, some of these issues of transgender people or not traditionally stereotypical gender expressions, that's a situation. Even when you have, we have some situations at the Owings Mills campus, for example, where there's an individual who doesn't portray stereotypically female, but uses the female restroom. And, and then people can act not welcoming.
Yeah.
And so we have to work, through that, right? Because, folks just need to go to the bathroom.
Exactly.
Let's let that happen. And it's not about anything else.
And that's right. I wanted to ask also, are there other efforts you personally have taken to advocate, support, and be involved in the LGBT community at CCBC? And have you attended any events in or out of CCBC?
Well, sure. I've attended events outside of CCBC. And, it used to be, right, that was the only way that you would find community.
Yeah.
And then within CCBC, I was very fortunate when I came, Professor Schlusser invited me to attend, a couple of events that I'm not sure what we called it at the time, maybe the Gay Student Alliance, or maybe it had a different name. But he invited me to several of those events, and it was fun. It was cool to have that opportunity.
So how did you meet your wife or other safe people or people you felt comfortable with in the community?
Sure. So, right, so we're going back, right? We're going back, there wasn't the internet.
Yeah.
And you didn't, right. So what did you do, right? Well, you would meet people through people. There's this joke, right? That there's, the lesbian toaster oven, or that people, the secret handshake, because really that's how you met people,
Right.
is through friends of friends, or, you would gather at the bars. Those were really the opportunities where, for me, in Central Illinois. And then, so I was in Springfield, and we had one gay bar, but we wouldn't go to that bar because, well, that was too close to the people that, we might see somebody else. So we would go, we would drive 2 hours away to go to Peoria or to St. Louis or to Champaign-Urbana and go to the gay bars there. And so we would do that. We would go to concerts, and you would meet people that way. And so, I have many friends from that time, but they were all kind of, I don't know, secret friends, right?
Yeah.
And if you happened to be at an event that was, I'll call it a regular event, right? You would pretend that you didn't really know each other, because you didn't want to blow their cover, they didn't want to blow yours, and so you might have a secret wink or something, but you would just you would hide. You would both hide. That was kind of what you expected. And then, of course, there were people that were very safe, right? And there were people that would figure out that you were safe. So I had a situation, it happened, shortly before I left Illinois. So this would have been 94. We had a boiler operator, a utility engineer, was working for me, and I always knew him as Dave. And one day he said, and I had talked to him, a long time, and not every day, but occasionally, I'd see him in the hall, and he'd stop by. I was hoping that I could meet with you. Well, sure, fine. And he came in and he said, well, I sort of want to tell you something. And I said, well, if you're not comfortable, it's okay. Oh, no, I really want to tell you. And then he went on to tell me that he was transgendered, which I had no idea. And I said, well, yeah, I'm gay, right? And he said, well, I haven't fallen off the turnip truck, Melissa. I remember that. And so we were talking because he needed to make some plans. He was going to go for top surgery. And at that point, there were very few doctors, and there was certainly not insurance coverage. So, he had been working to save like $10,000 to get surgery. And we were talking about his recuperation time and what we were going to do so that he would still have a job, right? This was before the Family Medical Leave Act, all kinds of things. And so why do I tell that story? Because, I don't think you can understand, given how things are today, and generally how accepting people are, I don't think you just understand on the edges people were and how protective they had to be about themselves. It was, it's just a different time. Now, I'm talking about the 90s, right? Go back another 20, 30 years, and it was a heck of a lot worse than that. But, certainly, 30 years ago was a different time.
It was indeed. And how long have you been part of the LGBT community?
So I was a little late to the party. I guess it's been 36, 37 years. Yeah. So in my late 20s.
Let's ask, what do you hope to see in the future of CCBC, for the LGBT community? And are there any specific policies or programs you hope to see?
So what do I want to see? I want to see CCBC remain a welcoming and accepting community. And are there policies? I mean, I think that there will be. I'm not sure what they are. I mean, I don't think there's a burning policy right now. But I do think that CCBC has really worked hard to engage in that hard space of, what does this mean and how can we support folks? I mean, even for me, right? So I'm older, right? So even the pronouns are, they're, I work really hard, but it doesn't come natural when someone has they, them pronouns, right? And so, but I'll work on it, and I certainly support it and want people to feel comfortable, but it's a different, it's a different evolution. So coming out of that, I'm sure there will be things that CCBC can do to make that younger generation more accepted and to feel more belonging.
You mentioned the internet and phones and different technology, how technology has changed over time for you.
Yes.
So how did COVID affect your policy making? Did it affect your policy making? And perhaps over your career, how have you watched has policy changed? Because when you think of policy, you think of pen and paper. So has technology updating affected how you manage your career? That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that's a really interesting question. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely technology has changed over my career, right? So I remember early on, we had the first, personal computer, right? And floppy disks, and we'd put them in, and so I worked on salary scenarios on VisiCalc, which was like the baby version of Excel, and so we start with that, right? And now we go to the ability to share documents, work on them simultaneously, see data and a snapshot of our students and various characteristics, or if they've paid their tuition, or if they got an A. I mean, all kinds of things is just, it's available really at your fingertips. So it has changed my work, right? And it has changed our policy making in that you still have to write down the policy. And if you don't write it down, then it's really not a policy. But it does allow us to do it faster and with more collaboration. And now the challenge in front of us is making sure that the policies are in a place that everybody can access them, and that they know where to go, and access the policies. So absolutely, technology is so different, and it's a great opportunity. I would have never been guessed.
As my final question, What advice would you give to other LGBT individuals pursuing executive positions and leadership roles?
I would say do it. Do it because if you have the fire and the desire to do this kind of work, you shouldn't let being LGBT stop you. There's no need to do that anymore, right? The world is open. And so do what makes you happy and do the work that is fulfilling for you.